welcome to Car Chats with Herbie, your host today, whilst I drive back home in my 280,804 mile BMW 5 Series E39 generation, and it's just going to be some random facts about car history, as a lot of us share passions with automobiles and cars, and engineering and so on. And yeah, continuing about BMW as well, the M30-6, which was a predecessor of the very famous M52 and M54-6 is found in the E36 and later E46. The M30-6 was the base of many famous BMW engines. It was first introduced in 1968, and I believe was fitted to many BMWs of the era. Mainly, a lot of them were designed at the time by a man named Paul Baroque, which designed the first BMW 5 Series in 1971, I think it was released, and it was the first BMW D5 Series E12 variation to replace the double 002 models of BMW. So they went to an alphanumerical nomenclature, whatever you call it, fancy word, which means letter and number to designate the model and the capacity of the engine. But it's become a little bit whitewashed now with BMW as a 320 can come with many different variations of engines. Mainly one series are the worst for it. You get the 116i, the 118i, and the 120i. They're all 2-litre engines, let's say, Prince engines. Most of the 4-cylinder engines were quite poor by BMW, timing chain issues and things like that you had to watch for. But going back to the early 5 Series, it was the first BMW to have some sort of computer animated design, mainly for the crash structure of the BMW and the rollover structure, as safety became more of a focus. It was also a car in the early 70s where a lot of the contact points in a collision were padded for the occupant's safety, and all the control panels was more angled towards the driver and things, so it's moving more towards the modern layout of the cars to come in the next couple decades leading up to these days, where, as I believe personally, that modern interior design is a lot of cars lose their identity with it. Exactly the same with their exterior designs. I mean, look at where BMW are going now. I mean, the grills, it's kind of really leaning off BMW's heart of their design and their nameplate. It's more like a sci-fi Will Smith looking altered kind of deal, and there's too much electronics. Also, the E12 5 Series, it had the M30-6, as I said, which in itself, and the M10 4-cylinders. The M10 is an old engine that goes back to 1962. It's very old, and that lasted all the way up to let's give the old girl some boot. Still pulls all right. Oh, there we are, out the puff. Just before red line. But yeah, myself now as I come back home. Yes, and the M10 was replaced by the M42 4-cylinder engine, which had its problems as well. And it was that engine first shown on the E30, wasn't it? Was it E30? Yeah, E30 BMW 3 Series. And yeah, the M10 engine was the basis of the famous Formula 1 BMW engines, which were brought out by other teams as well. And a fun fact that I don't know if it's 100% true, but there's a lot of people that do say it is true, that the engineers used to wee on the engine blocks of those Formula 1 engines, because the uric acid used to help strengthen the steels and things. It reacted in a certain way. Don't know the exact science behind it, but some weird facts really. Yeah, and the M10, M30 engines it came with, and they got the sportier M35i engine, which was a modified variant of the M30 engine, and that variant itself differed in name as well, and also went on. The M30 later went on to become one of the first turbocharged straight six BMW engines too. You have to say that the 2002 was the first petrol turbocharged BMW engine, but that didn't last very long. And that was in the 3 Series, the early 3 Series, let's say. I believe that they were named E21s, but the first turbocharged inline 6 was found based on the M30, called the M102, not like Mercedes, and the M106, I believe. The later one had slightly lower boost pressure, knocked from 11 psi back down to around 9 psi, and it's slight increase in capacity to make up for the difference. It made the same power though, but yeah. The first turbocharged straight six was the E23 BMW 7 Series, model for years from 1977 till 1986, which it had quite a few technical, revelations at the time for an early car. But that engine itself was a modified variant of the M30 straight six, bored out as well, and all the M10, the M20, the M30, all these the 4-cylinder straight six of the 60s, 70s generations of engines, they had forged crankshafts, were based, had cast blocks, and I believe an aluminum head in a lot of them, and they were very strong bases for tuning, mainly all 12 valve single overhead camshaft engines. They were very reliable for an engine, and pretty overbuilt, to be honest. And they came with the 5 Series, was one of the first to introduce what's called Klingelfischke injection, which is German for fuel injection, pretty much. Which the carburetor started to be phased out and things, and it was the early days of fuel injection, so it would have been quite a problematic system to diagnose if you had an issue, let's say. And that went on to Bosch J-Tronic, and Bosch MJ-Tronic, and all the ones of Motronic in the 80s, which just got more advanced and advanced and advanced and advanced. And yeah, the engine in the 7 Series E23 BMW of the turbo variant, which was first introduced in the year 1981 or 2 and lasted to 83 and 4, that engine produced 258 brake horsepower, which people say was underpowered, but for the time that must have moved, because let's say 7 Series is the size of, weight of pretty much a 3 Series, equivalent then. So yeah, you have to say that for the time, these were huge advancements, and it really did move on the game. And yeah, I mean, the difference between the M20 and M30, the M20 was the smaller block engine, and it was the smaller capacity engine. Cars in Europe at the time were taxed if they were above a certain capacity, especially places like Sweden, where the 5 Series in Sweden differentiated quite a bit. It had a ski pull down, because obviously, you know, the weather there and things, the types of sports they have. It also had different headrests in the back. It had basic hub wheels as well. It had a different filler cap and things like that. The American variants, they obviously had what were known as the diving board bumpers, which later went into like plastic ones, which integrated the crash safe 5 mile an hour impact safety bumpers, which was legislated in the mid 1970s, 75, 76, I believe. But yeah, the M20 was a timing belt engine. The M30 was a chain. I would say a lot of people would much prefer a timing chain, as the rubber dry rots through age and things, and the acceleration, deceleration, and those snapping forces, the potential for damage to a belt increases. Let me just pull out this junction. Let's get some in second gear. Foot flat to the floor. Oh, run that puff. Still got it for the old diesel. I mean, rather have this than an electric car any day of the week. Any day of the week. For £1,000, don't knock it. Barely done any maintenance to it. Oil, filter, just keep it up on basic things, giving it a quick boot now and then, the old Italian tune-up, blow out some old cobwebs, keep it decoked, as we say. Which got Scotty Kilmer, I have to say. Scotty Kilmer, thanks very much for your informative videos and entertaining at the same time. I mean, I think he's one of the number one self-repair automotive channels in America. So any more facts about BMW that you might want to know? The BMW logo, by the way, isn't really it doesn't really resemble a propeller. That's people being misinformed, because in the 20s and 30s and 40s there's muck all over the road here. In the 20s, 30s and 40s, as we know, the Nazi Party, which I don't know if that would be censored, don't want to be demonetized, but they rose to power after 1933. I could say it started in 23 with the beer push thing happening, Hitler being arrested, writing Mein Kampf, and making millions, funding the party itself. Horrible party, to be honest. It was certain people in there which it was, BMW used to advertise, because they were aircraft manufacturers before they were car manufacturers. The order went with BMW. They went aircraft engines for World War I, called the BMW 3A, I believe designated, produced 230 horsepower when the Allies captured it and dyno tested it after the war. Slightly different measurements they got, because Germans use PS. I'm not going to try and pronounce it. It stands for it's ridiculous pronunciation. I'm no good because I'm dyslexic. Pronunciation or spelling. And they measure it slightly different. They don't use the old British measurement of measuring brake horsepower. They use a slightly different calculation, ours being based on, what was the guy called? I forgot his name. But yeah, it's to do horsepower, it's to do with a horse, so many pounds a horse treads and per foot around I think it's a mill, and it's calculated in that way. It's originally calculated, but it's not actually accurate, totally accurate. They use a different measurement, a different calculus for it. And yeah, they started with aeronautical engines, and they were made famous because they had, you know, better carburation, higher altitude carburation and things than the Allied planes. Better, you know, less stalling and things. And yeah, they also then went on to motorbikes, and were the first motorbikes to have shaft drive. And instead, at the time, BMW looked at the V-twin, horizontal twin engine, and a lot of the time, like Harley Davidsons, or Indian as they're known as well, Harley Davidsons at the time were, you know, they instead of having them angled forward, they would angle them outwards. So they would angle them like horizontal, like longitudinal, so that the shaft would go back instead of having to have a chain drive. And they had a lever throttle as well. We were early adopters of lever throttles, and their first bike was introduced in late 1922 or 23. It was R series of motorbikes, and they obviously proved to be very successful. And they later reintroduced the GS style models for Paris-Dakar and things, Project 1000 or something it was called, and that they were, you know, reintroduced the sort of flat twin trial style bikes. And then they went on to cars. They didn't make their own cars, they made a license. They had a license from Austin, as the Austin 7 is known to have one of the first real modern layouts for a auto car at the time, or motor car. You know, it had a key where it should be, an ignition key. It had a gear stick where it should be, it had a clutch, it had a brake and accelerator where it should be. You sat where you should, and it was drivable. And they had a license, and in the mid-30s they produced their first licensed car, rebranded the BMW Dixie. The BMW Dixie, and a strange little name, but then they went on to the 319 series of cars and started with the 320s and things like that. That they didn't look like they did, but those series of cars were the first cars to you know, introduce some of BMW's real patented designs, which they have now, like the straight engines, rear-wheel drive straight sixes, and things like that. And they had roadsters as well. I don't know too much about their early history, but they also produced helicopters in engines in World War II. The BMW Bumo engine for the 234 or 244 Drache, which means dragonfly in German, and they weren't very successful helicopter. I mean, when they were advertising the helicopter, you know, for propagandizing it, they used the helicopter that crashed, and used another helicopter, and to pick up the helicopter that crashed, because flying them was new and the technology wasn't truly down to a T at the time. But yeah, they produced many engines for the war effort and things. But yeah, and going into the 50s and 1960s, they really started to find themselves again, and they also had parts of East Germany. They had BMWs assembled post-war as well, and a lot of BMW engines were produced in a place called Steyr, in I believe it's an area of Germany that's very close to Sweden, and the engines, most of the engines now are produced in Steyr, or Steyr, as they would be known, as it's pronounced, I think. And there's Alpina too. Alpina started off there. If you look at the sign of Alpina, it's a shock absorber. I think it's a carburetor or camshaft and a shock absorber on the sign, and that they started off modifying BMW carburation and suspension systems for factory cars and things. And yeah, they as we know, they went on to modify many of BMWs, basically stripping them down, tuning them, and making a very sort of like mafia boss exclusive variant of a BMW. But yeah, there's many interesting facts that I could go on, and I hope you guys enjoy this random sporadic ramble on automotive history, and I hope to continue as it helps with my mental health and things like that. So thank you for watching if you've stayed the ramble, and on to the next episode. See you guys later.